Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's fantastic. I can hear you great now.
Sorry about that. It was my
That's,
headphones were in my office. I had it
yeah,
connected still.
it's
I'm
totally
so sorry
fine.
about that.
I knew you'd see it. I knew you'd see it and figure it out. Thank you.
Sorry. So let me give you a very brief overview of what we did. What we do quickly. So we started off with the idea of explaining the 3 steps forward, the 3 steps backwards. We explained that this comes from originally from a Mishnah, but let me see. Let me find it. Here it is. And the Gemara brings that. Sorry, it comes from a Gemara originally, and it tells us that when you pray, you got to take 3 steps back when you finish, and it's a sign of respect. Then we had the Ramah that brings that not only do we take 3 steps back, we take 3 steps forward. This comes from the Sefer HaRikeach, one of the early commentators from the 1100s, who writes that why do we do this? To emulate Moses. Moshe, when he went up to speak to Hashem, he went through 3 realms. He went through darkness and cloud, and then dark cloud, cheshech anan arafel. So we want to emulate what Moshe did. That's the idea why he went through 3 realms, then he went out of 3 realms, so we go into 3 realms and out of 3 realms. That's why we do the steps. And we said that obviously there's the concentration element, we're stepping up to the plate, etc. Some say it represents the 3 times we see in the Torah that our ancestors, Avraham, Yehuda, and Eliyahu, it says about them that they stepped forward in front of Hashem. Then we started talking about feet together. We said we do that because of the Zohar says the reason why the Mishnah says that we do that is because we want to emulate the way Yechezkel, the prophet, spoke about angels, that they have 1 foot. And then Rabbi Mimran in his book, which is based on Moshe Shapiro's teachings, one of the leading Jewish thinkers of the older generation, he writes that it's not only that; it's because when you're standing with 1 foot, you're very submissive. You're vulnerable. You realize that you're entirely dependent on Hashem because you're somewhat immobilized. So that's why we're emulating angels, but taking it to a next level. Okay, I think we're up to. We're up to there. Okay, bowing. So we mentioned this idea. We started it. We said, why do we bow at the beginning and the end? We have 2 blessings at the beginning and 2 blessings at the end of the Shemoneh Esrei that we bow. Why do we do this? So the first source of this comes from the Gemara in Brachas in 12, Daf Yud Beis. The Gemara says that you should bow when you say the word Baruch, which means blessed, and then stand up straight for when you say the name of Hashem. This is a common mistake. People often bow when they say the name of Hashem, but whenever we say the name of Hashem, we have to stand with respect up. Why do we do this? Because King David in Tehillim says that God lifts up those who are bowed, so we want Hashem to lift us up. Then we had the Zohar that says that anybody who doesn't bow, his prayers will not enter into the sanctuary. Now, the Siddur Rav brings, to explain this is what we're up to now, the idea of bowing in the Amida, in the Shemoneh Esrei. He says the idea of bowing is this concept of total nullification of will. And this is, even in the some nations, African nations, where they still have, real or semi-real kings, they bow in front of the king. This is the idea. That is, I'm a nobody and you're everything. It's a nullification of our own will. This is why our sages say, nullify your will before his will. This is a quote from a Mishnah in Avos, in Ethics of Our Fathers. It says that our job is to put away our personal desires in front of Hashem's. And a typical example of this would be fasting. We're commanded to fast, especially the bigger fast, Tisha B'Av. This year it's pushed off, but still. And then we have Yom Kippur, and we want to eat. That's our desire. Our desire is to eat, but Hashem's desire is for us not to eat. So that's a typical, the most simple example of this. And it must be with your body also to bend the head. But the main concept is a nullification of one's will, and this impression will remain after prayers for the rest of the day. This idea of submissing ourselves, of nullifying our own will in front of Hashem's. Rabbi Shimon Raphael Hirsch, in his commentary in the Siddur, says, why do we bow and straighten up? when we say these words, Baruch, blessed. In this way, we express our promise to be, good servants, disciples, and to Hashem. And we stand straight when we say Hashem, as if to say Hashem is not bent, but that He straightens us. Therefore, we only bow in the blessings of the patriarchs, which is the first blessing of Avos, Baruch Hashem, etc. And later on in Thanksgiving and Moedim, because we're not bowing the whole time. Hashem doesn't need our bowing, but we're referencing that we are bent. We are nullifying our own will, and Hashem raises us up. Okay, moving on. The Gemara Baba Kama says that the Talmud warns against not bowing, similar to the Zohar, but it takes a step further. Yeah.
We're bowing on Baruch Hashem.
Yeah.
Modim Anachnu doesn't say that.
Very good. Yeah. That's just Modim. That's different. That's a bowing of thanks. The root of it is both the same.
But you don't bend your knees when you bow to that.
Yeah.
Stand up.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. So just to clarify what you just said, by Baruch Atah Hashem, we bend the knees by Baruch, bend our head and bow by Atah, and then stand up straight by Hashem. Baruch Atah Hashem. By Modem, we just bow. And
some people even stand up.
Yeah. It's a nice. Sephardim are okay with that. They say just doing that is okay because you can stay sitting down. The Ramah says it's better to stand up for it. Okay, so Talmud brings a very graphic description of what's going to happen to somebody who doesn't bow during Moedim. And again, Moedim is a thanksgiving one. When we sing thanks to Hashem and we're not bowing, the spine of a person turns into a snake 7 years after burial. This only happens to somebody who fails to bow during Moedim. Again, this doesn't actually happen, I would say, but it's a kind of like it's trying to explain the severity. That somebody who doesn't bow, he's thanking Hashem, but he's doing it so flippantly that he refuses to even, bow as he's supposed to. It's a sign of disrespect, and therefore he deserves to have his spine turn into a snake. Reb Shimshon Raval Hirsch, he says, Rav Avraham Chaim Shor in his Sefer Torah Chaim, on that Gemara, he says, he attempts to explain what does this mean, the idea of a snake. One who maintains an upright posture and does not even bow while stating his gratitude is essentially denying any gratitude. It's like, we call it lip service. If you're thanking Hashem for everything you have, everything He made work out, the fact that we're alive, the fact that we're healthy, the fact that we have family, everything, and you're not willing, you don't feel it enough to bow. It's called denial. We see this in the pasuk in regards to Dasan and Avira. They are depicted as standing upright, and this is very often when the Jews misbehaved in the desert. They were told that they were an upright nation. They were had upright spines. That means they were kind of stubborn and refused and disrespectful. Refused. Similarly, the Medrash depicts the primeval serpent as approaching Chava in an upright posture. The Medrash tells us that until the sin of Adam and Chava, eating from the tree of knowledge, the snake could walk, and after that, it could only lie on the ground. And that was one of the curses the Torah tells us. One of the curses of the snake was that it's going to crawl on the ground. In fact, this is why the serpent's punishment was, on your belly you should crawl. That's it. As Rashi teaches us, it had legs which were removed. We can suggest that this is why the spine of someone who fails to bow during Moed and turns into a serpent, he is espousing the philosophy of the primeval serpent from which all denial and ingratitude follows. The serpent says, no, we don't need Hashem. Hashem told you not to eat from the tree of knowledge. Just eat from it. You'll be fine. It had no gratitude. It was stubborn. It denied. And therefore, its punishment was to lie on the ground. So a person's punishment would be the same thing. Okay, so here's a summary. We have a very specific protocol when praying the Amida. And again, I just want to contrast that to the rest of the Tefillah. You want to say Baruch Shama loud. You want to say any other part of davening loud, quiet. As long as you can hear what you're saying, you're fine. You can choose whether to say loud or quiet. You can face any direction you want. You can walk around. You can stand up for most of it. You can sit down for any of it. Or the opposite. You can sit down for most of it. You can stand up for any of it. But with Amida, we have a very specific protocol. We say it quietly, standing on our feet, together, facing Jerusalem. We say the words aloud it would be to show ourselves that we're speaking to Hashem, but we do it quietly because we know Hashem is listening. Right? We don't need to say it out loud. Before we begin, we take 3 steps forward in the spirit of Rabbi Mimran and Eliyahu, who approached Hashem in prayer. We also mentioned that the 3 steps are because of Moshe. And when we conclude, we bow and take 3 steps back. We stand straight like an angel, recognition that Hashem is in control, and we bow in submission and gratitude before our Maker, before Hashem. Okay, let's briefly start this second section. Okay. So we've spoken about the structure and everything. Now we move on to the repetition. And we've mentioned this briefly. This is a shorter section. We'll just finish this section. And the idea is, where did this come from? So once a minyan, and we need to have a minyan, 10 men, that finished silently praying the Shema Esra during only Shachris and Mincha, not married, then the Shaliach Tzibur, the leader of the services, will repeat it loud. Why? So at a time when they didn't have good printing presses or any at all, and prayer books weren't readily available, we needed to assist people that didn't know how to pray. So listening is a halachic concept that when you listen to something with intention for it to be as if you said it, it is as if you said it. As long as the person saying it also has intention that it should be as if the listener said it. So instead of the person himself saying it, they would listen to it. So that's why after everyone prayed quietly, they would listen to those who didn't know.
I thought so many people couldn't read.
It's that. It's a good question. Let's see. Let's see.
That's why you listen. And that you could say Amen and you would get credit. That would,
It's a good point you say, because I assumed like you as well, because the way the Gemara puts it, we'll see in a second, is for those who are not experts. Those who are not experts, that means people who can't read. But you could say the opposite. Those who are not experts, they don't know Alf by heart. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what level of expertise you're talking about. Let's read the Gemara. It's right over here. It was taught the sages said to Rabbi Gamliel, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, according to you, why is the congregation prayer silent in Amida? He said to them so that the leader can arrange his prayer. It's basically this idea that everyone has to pray together at the same time. Rabbi Gamliel said, according to you, why does the leader repeat the Amida? He said to the sages, why do we have a repetition? And they said, in order to fulfill the obligation for somebody that isn't an expert. If you look in the Hebrew, Misha Ein Baki, somebody who's not an expert. Somebody who's not an expert. So you could say that means somebody who doesn't know how to read. Or you could say somebody that doesn't know off by heart. Okay, let's see the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch sounds like what you say, actually. Shulchan Aruch says, after the congregation has finished prayer, the leader repeats the Amida, so that if someone doesn't know how to pray, he can concentrate on what the leader says and thus discharge the obligation. Sounds like he doesn't know how to pray. Not that doesn't have a book. And the truth is, during the time of Rabbi Yosef, they still didn't have a printing press. They were still handwriting everything, obviously. Didn't have a typewriter or anything. So you could still say the 2 explanations. Maybe doesn't know how to pray means doesn't know it off by heart.
The Gutenberg press is what, year 12, 1300?
It's afterwards.
It's after that.
Yeah. Not long, but it's afterwards. Interesting. Okay. So I still open the question. See, I see what I see. I see it can go both ways. But according to doesn't know how to pray, sounds to me doesn't know how to pray even from inside. Because he can write it out himself. It's not very long. Shemona Esra is, like we said before, a couple of 100 words. Handwrite it, big deal. So it sounds like the Shulchan Aruch is saying, but the way they some explanations bring it, they're like, no. People are doing enough by heart. Interesting. I would side with you. Okay. Next up, we see that the repetition was only done when we're in a shul. Was only made for that. It wasn't made for people, because in the olden days, it wasn't very common. All the shuls were only for praying, and they had separate rooms which were for studying, for learning Torah. And sometimes they would pray in the studying hall. In the middle of studying, they just want to stand up and pray and carry on learning. So they pray with it. Now there, they wouldn't do the repetition.
Because everybody knew.
Huh?
Because everybody knew.
Oh. Yaakov Kamenetsky answers Yaakov. He says, it seems that the main decree of the repetition was only in the shuls where there were people who didn't know how to pray, but in the base medrash where only Torah scholars prayed, they didn't institute a repetition because there was nobody there that didn't know, that was not an expert. Right? So it wasn't because of the learned population. It was only for the population that may not know how to pray.
which is why we still have to repeat it out loud today, because most of the people in the congregation don't know how to read it and have no idea what it says.
Yes, but as we'll see in a second, there's even more to it, which is why even if everybody, hopefully God willing, becomes knowledgeable, we're still going to continue to do it. And even if you go to a place where everybody knows everything off by heart and knows it, they still do it. Why? Because now, I mean, there's so much more to it on a Kabbalistic point. We'll see in a second what it is. that once it's instituted, we don't uninstitute it. And nowadays, we don't distinguish between the two. So repetition, according to the Kabbalah, is on a higher level than the quiet Shemona Esra. What does that mean? Reb Shimshon Pinkus says, it is known from the writings of the Arizal there's tremendous advantage of the communal repetition of the Amida over that of the silent prayer, as well as an astounding difference in the respective level of and quality of these prayers. The sages alluded to this in the Talmud. The Gemara says in Brachas, one who prays and is not answered should repeat his prayers. Now, the simple explanation of this Gemara means never give up on praying. Don't just pray once for you won't pray again and again. But the deeper meaning is, says the Gaon, the Vilna Gaon, the Gaon from Vilna, that's referring to the communal repetition of the Amida, and through this our prayers are answered. The Gemara says if your prayers are not answered, repeat the Amida in a quorum, in a shul with 10 people. To Chazar Sashatz. Valzeh Nemar, regarding this it says in Pasuk Yev, behold, Hashem does not despise the numerous. If you pray numerous times, Hashem won't despise it. And the sages say in the Gemara Brachas, God does not despise communal prayer, for the communal repetition of the Amida is the essence of communal prayer. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So, and really the reason for this concept is based on Kabbalah. We'll see in a second, the Ben Ishchai, Yosef Chaim of Baghdad, he wrote every year concepts which connect to the parasha. So in the first year, he wrote the following. He says, even though the simple reason we repeat the Amida out loud is for those who are unable to say it themselves, this is not the main reason. For nowadays, this reason is almost irrelevant, since almost everyone can pray from a siddur and therefore is able to say it. And I think he's even correct nowadays, because everybody can take a transliteration and pray from that. However, the real reason is explained in the writings of the Arizal, based on Kabbalistic secrets, and explained in Sefer Kavanis. In the repetition of the Amida, we again do all of the spiritual rectifications that were accomplished in silent Amida. But the repetition reaches a higher place in heaven than the silent Amida. You can almost look at it as the silent Amida is each one of us praying, obviously as a group, but the repetition is a communal prayer. It's one prayer from all of us, 10 plus. And the entire congregation is going up. Unbelievable. So the silent Amida may only be recited silently because it is more limited spiritually than the communal Amida, which is repeated aloud. That's what we'll see in a second. The Kaf HaChaim, Rabbi Yaakov Chaim Sefer, he writes, in the days of the Arizal, permission was granted to reveal the Kabbalistic secrets, and he revealed the secret to the repetition of the Amida that is higher level than the silent Amida, and that both of them are obligatory. Therefore, the Arizal during the repetition of the Amida would close his eyes and listen and concentrate of every word of the leader. Unfortunately, nowadays, many people do that. Actually, in this community, more than most people, I see people following in, which is a phenomenal thing. But many look at it as just a technicality, a halachic caveat that we have to repeat. But indeed, the Arizal would listen and concentrate to every single word. So again, the key theme before we start the third section is the sages enacted repetition in a communal setting initially for those who didn't know how to pray. And when they listened to the words as if they said it, the repetition on behalf of the community, we then learned that on a Kabbalistic level is higher than the silent prayer, and it's through this that one's prayers are answered. Yeshakach. Okay, next week we will finish this introduction, and then the week after that we will start the actual going through the words of the silent Shemona Esra and seeing just a small part of the depth behind it. So next week is going to be on the importance of concentration. See you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you.